The church bells tolled ominously as the casket was lowered into the ground, and Chris Thompson watched from the back of the crowd, his hands clenched around a simple bouquet of white lilies. No one noticed him, not really. To the mourners, he was just the florist who'd arranged the funeral flowers. A quiet man in a dark suit blending into the shadows of the rainy New York afternoon. But as the first shovelful of dirt hit the wood, Chris's world shattered for the second time that week. The secret he'd guarded for 15 years threatening to erupt like a storm he could no longer contain. 15 years ago, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, Chris had met David Harrington at a mutual friend's art gallery opening. David, with his sharp wit and easy charm, was everything Chris wasn't: outgoing, successful, the heir to a conservative family fortune built on real estate. Chris, a struggling florist from a working-class background, had been drawn to David's confidence like a moth to flame. Their first conversation turned into a late-night walk through the city, and by dawn, Chris knew he'd found something rare. But David had warned him from the start. "My family would never understand this. We have to be careful." And so began their hidden life, a love story woven in stolen moments, secret weekends, and coded messages. The Harrington family stood at the graveside now, David's parents rigid in their grief, his sister Emily wiping tears with a gloved hand. They were the epitome of old-money propriety, pillars of their upscale community in Manhattan. David's father, Reginald, a stern man who'd built an empire on traditional values, had always pushed his son toward a life of heteronormative success. A wife, kids, the family legacy. David had played the part flawlessly. The eligible bachelor, the charming executive who dated women publicly while building a private world with Chris. They'd exchanged vows in a quiet ceremony in Vermont 5 years into their relationship. Rings hidden on chains around their necks, a marriage known only to them and a sympathetic officiant. Chris's chest tightened as Reginald stepped forward to speak, his voice booming over the patter of rain. David was a son any father could be proud of. He lived with honor, upholding the values we taught him. The words stung like salt in a wound. Honor? Chris wanted to scream. What about the honor of loving someone fully, without shame? But he stayed silent, his role as the inconspicuous florist demanding it. He delivered the arrangements himself that morning, insisting on it as a final act of devotion, even though it meant facing the family who'd unknowingly kept them apart. As the service ended, people began to disperse, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Emily approached Chris, her eyes red-rimmed. "The flowers are beautiful," she said softly. "David always loved lilies." "Thank you." Chris nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had good taste, he managed, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. If only she knew how many bouquets he'd arranged for David over the years. Anniversaries celebrated in hidden cabins, apologies after arguments born from the stress of secrecy. Back at his flower shop in Queens that evening, Chris collapsed into a chair, the weight of the day crushing him. The shop was his sanctuary, filled with the scent of fresh blooms, but tonight it felt like a cage. He pulled out the chain from under his shirt, fingering the gold band that matched David's. They dreamed of coming out one day, when David's career was secure, when the family might soften. But a sudden heart attack at 42 had stolen that chance. Now, Chris was left with memories and a will that David had promised would protect him. "If anything happens," David had said last year, updating the document in secret, "this will make sure you're taken care of, and maybe it'll force the truth out." The phone rang, jolting Chris from his thoughts. It was David's lawyer, Marcus Hale. "Chris, we need to talk. The will reading is tomorrow." David left specific instructions. Chris's heart raced. Instructions? What had David done? He agreed to meet at the lawyer's office, hanging up with a sense of dread mixed with anticipation. This could be the moment everything changed or the spark that ignited a war. The next morning, Chris arrived at the sleek Manhattan law firm, dressed in his best suit to blend in. The Harringtons were already there. Reginald, stern and unyielding. Marjorie, David's mother, composed but fragile, and Emily, looking curious. Marcus greeted them all, settling into the conference room with its polished table and city views. "Thank you for coming," he began, opening the folder. "David's will is straightforward in most respects. The estate is divided among family, with charitable donations as discussed." Reginald nodded approvingly, but Chris felt the tension building. Marcus continued, "However, there's a significant bequest to Crisander Thompson." All eyes turned to Chris, confusion etching their faces. "The florist?" Marjorie asked, bewildered. Marcus cleared his throat. David left Chris his personal apartment in Brooklyn, along with a trust fund of $2 million. "And there's a letter." He slid an envelope across the table to Chris, but Reginald snatched it first. "What is this? Some charity case?" Chris's pulse thundered. "It's not charity," he said quietly, meeting Reginald's gaze. Marcus intervened. "The letter explains everything." David insisted it be read aloud if contested. With a nod from Emily, Marcus opened it and began, "Dear family, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and it's time for the truth. Chris isn't just a friend or a florist. He's my husband. We've been married for 10 years, together for 15. I loved him more than anything, but I hid it because I was afraid of losing you. Forgive me for the deception, but understand, this was real." The room exploded. Reginald stood, face red with fury. "This is a lie. David wasn't. He couldn't be." Marjorie gasped, hand to her mouth. Emily stared at Chris, piecing it together. Chris sat frozen, the secret finally free, but the cost already mounting. Reginald turned on him. "You manipulated him. This is fraud." Chris shook his head. It was love, pure and simple. But as accusations flew, Chris realized the battle had just begun. The family he'd feared for years now saw him as the enemy, and the inheritance was just the fuse. Over the following weeks, the fallout intensified. Reginald hired investigators, digging into Chris's background, searching for dirt to contest the will. Whispers spread through their social circles. David Harrington, the Golden Son, had lived a double life. Chris faced harassing calls, his shop vandalized with slurs spray-painted on the windows. "Faggot," one read, a word that cut deep, echoing the prejudices David had shielded him from. Yet amid the chaos, Emily reached out. "I need to understand," she said over coffee in a neutral cafe. Chris told her everything. Their first date, the hidden trips, the nights David cried over the pressure to conform. "He wanted to tell you," Chris said. "But your father." Emily nodded, tears welling. "Dad's old school, church, tradition. But David was my brother. If he loved you, that matters." Her support was a lifeline, but it came at a price. She distanced herself from her parents, fracturing the family further. Chris grappled with his own guilt. Had their secrecy been worth it? The years of lying had eroded David's health, stress contributing to his heart issues, doctors said. Chris wondered if coming out earlier could have saved him. But hindsight was cruel. As the legal fight dragged on, Chris made a decision. He wouldn't back down. This was for David, for their love. The courtroom loomed, a place where truths would clash with traditions, and Chris braced for the storm. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan buzzed with the hum of lawyers and litigants, but for Chris, it felt like entering a coliseum. Reginald's suit against the will had escalated quickly, claiming undue influence and questioning the validity of the secret marriage. Chris sat beside Marcus, his lawyer, fingers drumming nervously on the table. Across the aisle, the Harrington's attorney painted a picture of manipulation. Mr. Thompson preyed on David's vulnerabilities, coercing him into a hidden relationship for financial gain. Chris's stomach churned. Vulnerabilities? Their love had been David's strength, not his weakness. Testimonies began with Reginald on the stand, his voice steady but laced with disdain. David was a normal man. He dated women, talked about starting a family. This claim is absurd. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened impassively. When Chris's turn came, he spoke from the heart. We met at an art show. It wasn't planned. David pursued me as much as I did him. We hid because he feared rejection from you. He looked at Reginald, who averted his eyes. Our marriage was legal, witnessed. Love doesn't need approval to be real. Emily testified next, her voice trembling. I found photos after his death. David and Chris on vacations, looking happy. He never told me, but now I see why. Our family. We're not accepting. I support the will. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Marjorie, in the audience, bowed her head, conflicted. Reginald glared at his daughter, the betrayal cutting deep. That night, Emily called Chris. Dad disowned me for testifying. Said I'm no longer a Harrington. Chris winced. I'm sorry. This is destroying everything. But Emily replied, no. It's revealing what was already broken. As the trial progressed, media caught wind. Tabloids splashed headlines. Heiress's secret gay marriage shocks elite family. Protesters gathered outside, some in support of LGBTQ rights, others decrying moral decay. Chris's shop suffered. Customers boycotted, calling him a homewrecker. One evening, a brick shattered his window. A note attached, "Stay in the shadows where you belong." Chris cleaned up alone, tears mixing with glass shards. The pressure mounted, his sleep haunted by dreams of David, urging him to fight. In a pivotal moment, Marcus presented evidence. Emails, photos, even a video from their vow renewal in a private garden. This wasn't coercion, he argued. It was commitment. The Harrington side countered with psychologists claiming David suffered from internalized conflict, implying the relationship was unhealthy. Chris seethed. Unhealthy? The real sickness was the societal chains that forced them into hiding. Off the stand, personal confrontations escalated. Reginald cornered Chris in the hallway. You ruined my son's life. He could have had a real family. Chris stood tall. We were his real family. You just couldn't see it. Reginald's face twisted. You're nothing but a pervert leeching off our name. The words echoed old fears Chris had buried. Growing up in a blue-collar neighborhood where being gay meant beatings or worse. But he'd built a life, found love. Now, defending it meant risking everything. Emily, meanwhile, faced her own turmoil. Her fiancé, pressured by the scandal, called off the engagement. I can't marry into this mess, he said. She confided in Chris over lunch. I thought I knew my brother. But it's like grieving twice. Chris nodded. Hiding ate at him. He wanted to come out after his promotion last year. But your father's health scare stopped him. Emily sighed. Dad's heart issues mirror David's. Stress from expectations. The irony wasn't lost on them. The family's rigid values were a silent killer. As closing arguments neared, Chris made a risky choice. He offered to settle. Keep the apartment but forfeit the money if Reginald acknowledged the marriage publicly. It's not about cash, Chris told Marcus. It's about validation. Reginald refused, seeing it as admission of defeat. The judge deliberated, and in her ruling, upheld the will. The evidence shows a genuine relationship. Society evolves. Families must too. Cheers from supporters outside. But inside, Reginald stormed out, vowing an appeal. Victory was bittersweet. Chris moved into the Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by David's things. Books, clothes, a half-finished painting. But loneliness crept in. Friends distanced themselves, wary of the drama. One night, staring at their wedding photo, Chris whispered, Was it worth it, David? The hiding, the pain. No answer came, only the city's hum. The appeal loomed, Reginald unyielding. He cut off Marjorie's access to funds unless she sided with him, forcing her into a moral quandary. I loved my son, she told Emily in a tearful call. But was he happy? Emily urged her. Meet Chris. See for yourself. Reluctantly, Marjorie agreed to a private meeting at a neutral park. They sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson, the spring sun warming the air. Chris brought lilies, David's favorite. He talked about you often, Chris said. You're baking your stories. Marjorie's eyes softened. He was always so guarded. I thought it was work stress. Chris shared memories. Their quiet dinners, David's laughter. He hid to protect you from disappointment. Tears fell. Or to protect himself from us. In that moment, a crack formed in the family's armor. Marjorie hugged Chris goodbye, whispering, "Thank you for loving him." But Reginald discovered the meeting and exploded, accusing Marjorie of betrayal. Their marriage, already strained, teetered. Choose, family legacy or this farce, he demanded. Marjorie, for the first time, stood firm. David was our legacy, and Chris was part of him. She moved in with Emily, the divide widening. Chris, bolstered by this shift, prepared for the appeal. But doubt lingered. Had David's death been the ultimate price of their secrecy? Medical records showed chronic stress, high blood pressure, symptoms of a life in conflict. Chris visited David's grave, laying flowers. "I miss you, but I'm fighting for us." As he left, a sense of resolve settled. The battle wasn't just legal. It was for every hidden love story, every soul crushed by expectation. The appellate court hearing brought a new wave of scrutiny, with Reginald's team arguing the original judge was biased toward modern agendas. Chris sat through it all, exhaustion etching lines on his face. Outside, protesters clashed, rainbow flags waving against signs proclaiming traditional family values. One evening, after a grueling day, Chris found a supporter's note on his door. "You're brave. Keep fighting." It was a small light in the darkness. Marjorie's defection had shifted dynamics. She testified this time, her voice steady. "I met Chris, saw the love in his eyes for my son. David hid because he knew we'd judge." The courtroom hushed. Reginald's face paled. His own wife turning against him was a blow he hadn't anticipated. In cross-examination, the lawyer pressed, "You believe this after one meeting?" Marjorie replied, "I believe it because I failed to see my son's pain before." Emily, now fully allied with Chris, uncovered old family letters. One from David's grandfather revealed a hidden truth. A gay uncle disowned decades ago. "History repeats," she told Chris. "Dad's fighting his own ghosts." Armed with this, they confronted Reginald at his office. "Read this," Emily said, handing over the letter. Reginald scanned it, his hands shaking. This was different. But doubt flickered in his eyes. The appeal dragged, costs mounting. Chris's shop struggled. He took a second job as a delivery driver to make ends meet. One night, delivering to a high-rise, he overheard tenants gossiping about the Harrington scandal. Poor guy living a lie. It stung but also fueled him. David's lie had been for survival, but Chris's truth was for liberation. A turning point came when a journalist approached Chris for an interview. "Share your story," she urged. Hesitant, Chris agreed. The piece running in a major New York paper. The Secret Husband. Love in the Shadows. It humanized him, detailing their quiet life, the joy amid secrecy. Public opinion shifted. Letters of support poured in. But backlash followed. Death threats, online harassment. Chris installed security cameras, paranoia setting in. Reginald, seeing the tide turn, offered a private settlement. Half the trust fund. No public acknowledgement. "Take it and disappear," his lawyer said. Chris refused. "This isn't about money. It's about David being seen." Emily backed him. "Dad, admit it. For once, let go." Marjorie pleaded with her husband over dinner. "Our son is gone. Don't lose us too." Reginald stormed out, but seeds of change were planted. In a surprising twist, Reginald collapsed during the next hearing, chest pains, echoing David's fate. Rushed to the hospital, doctors diagnosed stress-induced arrhythmia. From his bed, he called Emily. I don't want to end like this. She brought Chris. In the sterile room, Reginald looked frail. Why David? He whispered. Chris sat. Because love doesn't choose sides. He loved you too, but he needed to be himself. Tears welled in Reginald's eyes. I pushed him away. It was the first crack in his armor. Recovery brought reflection. Reginald dropped the appeal, the will standing. But the real victory was personal. At a family dinner, awkward, tense, Reginald addressed Chris. I can't change the past, but you're welcome here. It wasn't full acceptance, but a start. Marjorie smiled. Emily beamed. Chris felt a weight lift, though scars remained. Life moved forward. Chris reopened his shop with Emily's help, rebranding it Harrington Blooms in David's honor. Customers returned, some drawn by the story. But inner conflicts lingered. Chris joined a support group for LGBTQ widows, sharing his tale. The secrecy saved us short-term, but long-term, it killed him. Others nodded, their stories mirroring his. One member, a young man named Chris, reminded Chris of David, ambitious, closeted. My family's like yours was, Chris said. Chris advised, don't wait. The cost is too high. It became his mission, mentoring, advocating. But doubts crept. Had he enabled David's hiding? Therapy sessions unpacked it. You both chose survival over risk. Forgive yourself. As months passed, the family healed unevenly. Reginald attended a PFLAG meeting, awkward but trying. Marjorie baked for Chris, a gesture of inclusion. Emily planned her wedding, inviting Chris as family. At the ceremony, Chris watched, ring on his finger openly. David would be proud, Emily whispered. Yet not all wounds closed. Old friends of the Harringtons shunned them, social invites drying up. Reginald lost business deals, conservatives pulling out. The price of progress, he muttered. Chris faced similar. A cousin disowned him, calling it unnatural. Society's acceptance was patchwork, progress laced with pain. In quiet moments, Chris visited the grave. We did it, he said. But questions haunted. Was the revelation worth the family's fracture? The answer evolved daily. Years blended as Chris built a new normal. The shop thrived, becoming a hub for inclusive events, gay weddings, pride arrangements. But echoes of the past lingered. One day, a customer recognized him. You're the guy from the news. Brave story. Chris smiled faintly. It wasn't bravery. It was necessity. Inside, he wrestled with the moral ambiguity. Had their love justified the deception? Emily's life flourished. She had a child, naming him David Jr. Uncle Chris. The boy called him, a title that warmed Chris's heart. But Reginald's health declined, guilt manifesting physically. In a candid talk, Reginald admitted, I see now how my expectations suffocated him. Chris nodded. We all paid prices, but change came from it. Reginald passed a year later, his will leaving a portion to LGBTQ charities, a quiet atonement. Marjorie moved in with Emily, finding purpose in volunteering. David's story opened my eyes, she said. Chris visited often, their bond strengthening. Yet he faced his own crossroads. A new romance sparked with Tom, a teacher open about his sexuality. No hiding, Tom insisted. Chris agreed, but habits died hard, instinctive caution in public. Their first date ended in a kiss on a busy street, a freedom David never had. Conflicts arose. Tom's family embraced them, contrasting the Harringtons' struggle. Why not us sooner? Chris pondered. Therapy revealed. Trauma from secrecy lingers. He worked through it, but a heated argument with Tom exposed cracks. You still act like it's a secret, Tom yelled. Chris retreated, memories flooding. Reconciliation came, but it highlighted the long-term damage. Society's lens sharpened. Chris spoke at conferences, his story a case study in internalized homophobia. The moral dilemma: lie to survive or risk everything? Attendees debated fiercely. One session turned personal when an attendee challenged, "You enabled his closet. That's complicit." Chris countered, "Love in a hostile world isn't black and white." The exchange left him shaken, questioning his choices anew. A documentary crew approached, wanting to film the hidden vows. Chris hesitated. Reliving pain for public consumption? Emily encouraged, "It could help others." He agreed, the process cathartic but grueling. Interviews with Marjorie revealed her regrets. "I missed signs. The pressure we put on him." Footage of the trial, the grave, painted a raw picture. Released to acclaim, it sparked national dialogue on family acceptance. Backlash followed. Conservative groups boycotted, labeling it propaganda. Chris received hate mail, but also thank yous from closeted individuals. "Your story gave me courage," one read. The duality weighed. Exposure healed some, hurt others. Tom proposed a public event in Central Park. Chris said yes, the ring gleaming openly. Planning the wedding, they invited the Harringtons. Marjorie attended joyfully. Emily walked Chris down the aisle. It was a celebration of progress, but absent was David, a ghost in the joy. Post-wedding, Chris reflected on trade-offs. The secrecy had preserved their love temporarily, but at what cost? David's life cut short, family torn, personal scars. Yet, from ashes rose awareness, bonds reformed. A new challenge emerged. Chris from the support group came out, facing disownment. Chris mentored him through it, drawing parallels. The choice to hide or reveal, its ethical minefield. Chris thrived, but not without loss. As Chris aged, he wrote a memoir, Shadows of Love. It delved into the psychology, the internal battles, societal pressures, moral quandaries. Reviews praised its honesty. A poignant look at the cost of authenticity. In the end, Chris found peace in small acts, teaching floral design to queer youth, advocating for inclusive policies. But the question persisted, did the ends justify the means? Years blended seamlessly as Chris navigated his reinvented life. The flower shop, now a bustling haven in Queens, had transformed into more than a business. It was a symbol of resilience. He hosted workshops for LGBTQ youth, teaching them not just about arranging blooms but about arranging lives amid adversity. "Flowers teach us about beauty and fragility," he'd say, his voice carrying the weight of experience. But in quiet hours, when the shop emptied, doubts resurfaced. Had their 15 years of secrecy been a necessary shield or a self-imposed prison? The moral gray areas haunted him, decisions that seemed right then now blurred by hindsight. Emily's family grew. Little David Jr. toddled around, his laughter a balm. "Tell me about Uncle David," the boy asked one day. Chris shared sanitized stories, their adventures, omitting the hiding. "He was brave," Chris said, but internally questioned. Was bravery in concealment or confrontation? Emily noticed his introspection. "You've changed us all," she assured. But change came with fractures. Old friends faded, unable to reconcile the new family dynamic. Reginald's decline was slow, a mirror to David's. Hospital visits became routine, conversations deepening. "I regret the pressure," Reginald confessed one afternoon. "I thought I was protecting the legacy." Chris replied gently, "Legacy is love, not lineage." Reginald's passing was peaceful, his final act amending his will to include Chris and support queer causes. A redemption arc incomplete but meaningful. Marjorie, now in her 70s, found solace in community work. She joined Chris at Pride events, her presence a statement. "I wish I'd known sooner," she lamented over tea. Chris hugged her. "We all do." Their bond, forged in loss, became a cornerstone. Romance re-entered Chris's life with Tom, a history teacher whose openness contrasted Chris's caution. Their relationship bloomed publicly. Dinners, walks hand in hand. But shadows lingered. During a family gathering, Tom's parents welcomed Chris warmly, sparking envy. "Why couldn't we have that?" Chris whispered to Tom's photo of David later. Therapy sessions unpacked layers. Secrecy wired you for survival mode. Progress was incremental. A public kiss felt revolutionary. Tensions peaked in an argument. "You're still hiding parts of yourself," Tom accused after Chris hesitated at a work event. "It's not that simple," Chris retorted, memories of vandalism flashing. They reconciled, but it underscored the enduring impact. Trust issues, hypervigilance. Chris's advocacy expanded. He spoke at universities, dissecting the ethics. Hiding love to appease society, right or wrong. It saves pain short-term, inflicts it long-term. Debates raged. One student argued, "You romanticize deception." Chris conceded, "It's complicated. But in a world of bias, survival trumps idealism sometimes." The documentary Hidden Vows thrust him back into spotlight. Filming revisited painful sites, the courthouse, the grave. Interviews with Emily and Marjorie added depth. "The family pressure was immense," Emily said. Released, it won awards, igniting conversations on social media. Hidden love trended, stories flooding in. Conservative pushback was fierce. Petitions to ban it, threats. Chris hired security, paranoia returning. But positives outweighed. A teen credited it with coming out safely. Tom's proposal in Central Park was magical, kneeling amid cherry blossoms. "Yes," Chris said, tears flowing. The wedding was intimate, the Harringtons present. Marjorie toasted, "To love without shadows." Honeymoon in Vermont revisited their vow site, bittersweet. Chris journaled thoughts, leading to his memoir. Shadows of Love explored psyches, the internal monologues, societal condemnations, ethical dilemmas of choice. Reviews lauded, raw, unflinching. It sold well, royalties funding scholarships for queer students. Mentoring Chris, now thriving post-coming out, Chris saw cycles break. "Your story saved me from the same mistakes," Chris said. In twilight years, Chris pondered the ultimate price. Lives altered, hearts mended, societies nudged. But the core question remained open. With the memoir's success, Chris's life took on a public dimension he hadn't anticipated. Book tours across the U.S. brought crowds, some seeking autographs, others advice. In Chicago, a young couple approached. "We're hiding from our families. What would you do differently?" Chris paused. "Come out when you're safe, but don't wait too long. The toll is invisible until it's not." Their nods reflected his own regrets, the moral weight of advising others while questioning his path. Back home, Tom supported him, but the travel strained their marriage. "I miss you," Tom said over video call from Seattle. Chris felt the pull, balancing advocacy with personal life. A near-miss car accident on tour jolted him. Was he honoring David or escaping grief? Therapy continued. "You're paying forward the lessons, but don't neglect now." The Harrington legacy evolved. Emily ran for local office, platforming on inclusivity. "My brother's story fuels me," she campaigned. Chris endorsed her, speaking at rallies. "Society's biases kill quietly. We must change." Opposition smeared. "Promoting deviance." Emily won narrowly, a victory for progress amid backlash. Marjorie's health faltered. Dementia set in. She confused Chris with David sometimes. "My boy, you're home," she'd say. Heartbreaking yet tender. Chris visited weekly, reading from their old letters. "Remember our trips?" he'd ask. Flashes of clarity brought tears. "I'm sorry we made you hide." A new conflict arose when a distant relative contested Reginald's amended will, claiming the queer donations were against family values. Chris testified again, weary of courts. "This is atonement, not aberration." The judge ruled in favor, but the fight drained him. "How many battles?" he confided in Tom. Society's shifts were evident. Marriage equality solidified, but pockets of resistance remained. Chris volunteered at shelters for homeless LGBTQ youth, hearing echoes of his youth. One teen, kicked out for being gay, reminded him of potential paths untaken. "Don't let fear define you," Chris advised, but internally debated. Had fear defined him in David? The documentary spawned a series, interviewing other hidden couples. Chris consulted, ensuring nuance. "Show the joy and the pain," he insisted. Episodes aired, ratings high. One featured a couple who came out post-David's story. "It gave us courage, gratifying, but Chris pondered the ripple effects. Families healed or broken. Personal awakening came during a retreat. Meditating on choices, he realized their love was pure, but secrecy a compromise with oppression. "We deserved better," he journaled. Tom and he adopted a dog, then considered kids. "A family of our own," Tom said. Chris hesitated, fears of judgment. But they proceeded, fostering a teen boy, Luca. "You're safe here," Chris told him. Luca's coming-out story mirrored theirs. Mentoring him healed old wounds. Emily's political rise brought scrutiny. A scandal erupted when opponents dug up old trial transcripts, accusing her of family betrayal. She stood firm. "Betrayal was ignoring my brother's truth." Chris supported publicly, the family united. As Chris turned 60, a health scare, high blood pressure mirrored David's. "Stress legacy," the doctor said. It forced slowdown, fewer tours, more time with Tom and Luca. Reflection deepened. The ethical maze of their choices, deception for love versus authenticity's risk. In a final act, Chris founded a foundation, Vows Unhidden, aiding closeted individuals. Launch event drew crowds, Marjorie attending in wheelchair. "Proud of you," she whispered. Life's tapestry wove on, threads of loss and gain intertwined. But the fundamental query lingered, sparking endless debate. The foundation thrived, becoming a beacon for those navigating similar paths. Chris oversaw programs, counseling, legal aid, awareness campaigns. One initiative paired mentors with ments. Chris's pairing with a corporate executive hiding his identity hit close. "The board would fire me," the man said. Chris shared his story. "I thought the same for David. But hiding erodes you." The man came out months later, crediting Chris. Successes like this affirmed the work, but failures stung. A mentee disowned, homeless. Tom's career as a principal intersected. He implemented inclusive curricula, drawing fire from parents. "Indoctrination," they claimed. Chris stood beside him at school board meetings. "Education saves lives." They prevailed, but exhaustion mounted. "Is it worth the fight?" Tom asked one night. Chris replied, "Always, for those who can't." Luca graduated high school openly gay with a supportive network. "Thanks to you," he told Chris. The adoption finalized, a full circle. Family holidays included Emily's clan, Marjorie passing peacefully surrounded by them. Her eulogy, delivered by Chris. She learned to love beyond bounds. As Chris entered his 70s, the memoir was adapted into a film. Script consultations ensured authenticity. No sensationalism. Show the internal wars. Premiering at Sundance, it moved audiences to tears. Reviews. A masterclass in moral complexity. Oscars buzz followed, but Chris cared more for impact. Viewers reaching out, families reconciling. Retirement loomed. He handed the foundation to younger leaders. Travel with Tom filled days, places David dreamed of. In Paris, atop Eiffel Tower, Chris reflected, "We made it through the storm, but memories surfaced. The funeral, the trials, the prices paid." A final interview summed his philosophy. Love demands sacrifices, but society's demands shouldn't force deception. The ethical line, blurred by context. In Twilight, Chris pondered the ultimate judgment. Their story sparked change, but at what cost to individuals? Families torn, lives shortened, yet progress born. Was hiding their love a moral failure, or a necessary survival tactic in an unforgiving world?